Welcome back to the Jackson Neill Sports Podcast here on Thursday, March 14th, 2019. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Today, talking about the AFC North, because I think that's the most interesting division in the NFL right now after all of the moves that have been happening in there. So I want to touch on that in today's podcast. And remember, you can check this out on SoundCloud, Stitcher, iTunes, YouTube, Spotify. Basically, wherever you like to listen to podcasts, this is available. Also, the new home for my podcast, JacksonNeillPodcasts.com. Link to that down in the description. There's where you can find the episodes for my sports podcast, my music podcast, and even my interview podcast, where I interview musicians, other people like that. Anything goes with Jackson Neill. So check all of that out. But today, touching on the AFC North and looking at that division, that has had some of the wildest off-season movement as of right now so far in free agency. Recording this at about 4:30 on this Thursday, March 14th. So if there's anything else I kind of miss in this segment about free agency moves or anything like that, just keep in mind this is as up-to-date information as I know. But the AFC North, as of right now, consisting of the Cincinnati Bengals, Pittsburgh Steelers, the Cleveland Browns, and the Baltimore Ravens. And a division that I think a lot of times just gets overlooked from the simple fact that the Bengals have been, good in recent years, never really made much noise in the playoffs, but it's usually kind of the Steelers and the Ravens, obviously the Browns, being the Browns as of recently, or the past 20 years or so. So it's a division that, normally there isn't too much going on. The Steelers-Ravens had a solid rivalry, but in recent years it's kind of been the Steelers dominating and the Ravens being solid, the Bengals having a good year here or there, but being mediocre. But this offseason, so much has happened in that division and so many different storylines that I decided to just kind of touch on the division as a whole because I couldn't pin it down to one team because there's a lot of takes I have for, I would say, 3 of the 4 teams. Now, the one team I'm going to start out and say I don't really have much to say about is the Cincinnati Bengals. They kind of, so far they've kept things mostly the same, no too big of changes. I think they're going to be very similar to how they were last year. A solid football team, nothing too special, nothing too terrible, in my opinion. When you don't make any huge moves, you're not going to have a big gain or anything from season to season. But the other three other teams between the Steelers, the Ravens, and the Browns have made some really, really splashy moves. And I kind of want to start off in the order I think they'll finish next year, because I think that's an interesting kind of exercise. If I had to pick the way this division is going to play out next year, first team I talk about, I'm going bottom to top, fourth to first. First team I'll touch on, Cincinnati Bengals. Like I just said, don't really have much to say about them. Moving up, though, to who I think is going to finish third in the AFC North next year. This is way before the draft, so keep that in mind. My early season prediction, I'm going to have to go with a team like the Baltimore Ravens, because the Baltimore Ravens so far have made two really big free agency signings in the past 24 hours or so. They got Mark Ingram from the Saints. They signed him after he was not re-signed by the Saints since they got Latavius Murray, and they also picked up Earl Thomas. Now, looking at that, you say to the Baltimore Ravens that some stuff changed, but not too much entirely. They did get rid of Joe Flacco. They paving the way for Lamar Jackson to start. And while I do view Lamar Jackson as a good quarterback, I don't think of him as really as good as I guess a lot of people rate him as, because when you look at his arm, it's not very good. And mobile quarterbacks, what's the problem with them always? Is durability. Look at Jackson's size. Lamar Jackson is not built to be taking hits. There's only one quarterback in my memory of the NFL, or actually 2. There's been a couple, but 2 quarterbacks really that are really even close to being kind of built for taking hits. 1, Ben Roethlisberger, and 2 would probably be Cam Newton. And we've seen both of them. Roethlisberger now in his old age start to break down, and we've seen Cam Newton now last season, just being a lost year for him, because I think his body, you just can't handle getting hit over and over like that. So for Jackson to be a mobile quarterback, it worries me. It worries me to no end. The only comparison I can keep on thinking of is Robert Griffin III. And now I did it, kind of a year or 2 in, I did start to have questions about RG3's leadership abilities and some stories that would come out from the Redskins locker room about if he was really that good of a leader, kind of, a little too self-centered or things along that line. So far, we haven't heard anything about that with Lamar Jackson. But what gets me about Jackson is the fact that he is just a small guy whose main thing we seem to bank on is running around. And while I think being mobile is certainly an asset, I think you can look at a quarterback like Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson is a really good example of how to be mobile correctly in the NFL. Use it to evade pressure. Use it to get out of getting hit, not to get hit. And I don't know if Lamar Jackson is there as of yet. I don't know if he'll develop those kind of skill sets. And when you look at him as a QB prospect, I'm not sure about that arm. There was definitely some questions in his rookie year about his arm. Now, he was able to put together some games, but my question is, yes, they signed Ingram. That's going to improve their running game. But what's stopping a defense from stacking the box and just saying, come on, throw it, Lamar. See, stretch the field, go up against us. And once that happens, I have a lot of doubts about what Lamar Jackson can do as a quarterback on the field. So I'm going to peg them as number 3. Second, I'm going to go with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I wanted to really touch on the Steelers today because of the whole Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown situation. The management of those two players was really some of the worst management I've seen in quite some time. And it shocks me to no end to the fact that I'm looking at the Steelers right now, and they are drastically worse. Yes, I know I'm picking them to finish second, but I kind of view it as 2A, 2B between the Ravens and Steelers as both not being all that good. But I picked the Steelers just because I believe in Ben Roethlisberger more than I do Lamar Jackson. But the fact that you would tell me that at this time last year, Steelers are a really good football team. They're the best team in that division, and they're kind of a move or two away from being a Super Bowl contender at that point, or a legitimate Super Bowl contender. And if you were to tell me that within a year they would be at the place they are at now, and a lot of that to do with the management, an organization such as the Steelers, such a great tradition of winning, it shocks me to no end. From not paying Le'Veon Bell what he's worth. Now, I understand that you don't want to give running backs too much money, but this guy, look at the deal he got with the Jets. It would not be unheard of to sign a running back up until the time he's 30. It would not be unheard of. And the fact that Le'Veon Bell, how good he is, I'm sorry, but pay that man. He's worth it. The way yes, I know James Conner, I know some other running backs were able to step in and do pretty well for the Steelers, but what Le'Veon Bell can offer as just a game changer on offense, he's not just very good, he is arguably the best running back when he's on in the NFL. And he does it in a way that we don't see anyone else. Ask any defense he goes up against. Ask any NFL insider. I saw Teddy Bruschi talking about it. About Le'Veon Bell's style, it's how patient he is. You have to play as a defensive player different against him, and I think you see the dividends that pays. But the yards he can gain, but the different things he can do outside of the backfield. Yes, he can run the football, but he's also a pretty good pass catching back. He's such a great all around running back, and I think an asset that is worth that kind of payday. He's absolutely worth it. I think he increases your chances for winning drastically. And when you have an older quarterback like Ben Roethlisberger, a quarterback who, definitely can struggle with interceptions at certain points, having a running back that he can just hand off and rely on, that really helps. And so I wonder what the thought process was for not just paying Le'Veon Bell what he was worth, making the cap space for that. Furthermore, looking at Antonio Brown, now, a lot of times, usually when a situation like Antonio Brown happens, the finger I first point at is the player. I think, most people might look at that, and Antonio Brown is this dude going crazy, kind of has it perfect going on. But when you couple what happened with Brown, where the complete, and I basically almost organizationally disrespect to Le'Veon Bell, a player who was an elite player for that franchise, and just not paying him for some reason, that disrespect shown towards Bell. Then you look at Brown, who is the game's best wide receiver right now, hands down. I mean, look at the production. Look at what he does on the field. You can't deny that. And yes, I think the quarterback position is the most important. I think they have to be the leader. But to then call the quarterback position the adult and everyone else on that roster, the 52 kids, that is just completely mind-boggling. That is such a terrible thing to say. I don't understand what can you gain from saying that? That's my question, is what can you gain from possibly saying that 52 players on your roster are just kids compared to the adult, quote-unquote, adult quarterback? I don't get that. And the fact that, what other QB goes on radio about once a week and just rips apart his wide receivers? Because Ben Roethlisberger does that. I think he has his weekly radio show or something along those lines out there in the Pittsburgh area, and he's been vocal, especially this past season, blaming Antonio Brown for a missed route or whoever. And I understand you have a wide receiver like Juju Smith-Schuster, a wide receiver who was a star in the making, but he's still on his rookie contract. And the way you win in the NFL is you have a couple stars, one of them being at the quarterback position, which I still think Ben Roethlisberger is a star quarterback. But you have a couple stars. They have one at the quarterback, the wide receiver, and the running back position. Then you get other talented players on rookie deals. And Juju Smith-Schuster was arguably a star on a rookie deal. It was a great man, so that gives you so much extra cap space to keep players like Antonio Brown. And when you make these comments as an organization, just basically demeaning the best wide receiver in the NFL, can you really blame them? I mean, if you are the best player, if you are the best in your profession in the world, no one has been better than you. And yet, the organization is still letting, the other person rip you apart in the media week after week. And let's be honest, I think a lot of times, we might be able to point the finger more at Ben Roethlisberger and an errant interception than we can for Antonio Brown dropping a pass or something along those lines. That's just the nature of football. That's the nature of any game, is that even the best in the world aren't perfect. That there's still going to be mistakes in a game, and that the answer to those, I think, as a leader, and I think it's pretty obvious, is not to go into the media and rip apart your teammates, but to say, hey, look, you made a mistake. Look how many interceptions I've thrown or fumbles I've lost or times I held onto the ball for too long and got sacked. Because Ben Roethlisberger has a laundry list of those throughout his career. Yeah, you missed a route. Okay, let's get him next time. And not throwing your players under the bus, especially when that player is giving as much production as Antonio Brown. So when I look at an organization like the Steelers, I just think of success. I think of a great franchise that is put together and well managed. And the past year or so, just completely turned that upside down, from terrible quotes in the media like that to just mishandling star players. In this case, I don't blame Antonio Brown or Le'Veon Bell for wanting to leave, because as of right now, I don't know if they were the reasons why that was a toxic situation. That's how I feel about it. And speaking of organizations who I consider to be just very well run, very well managed, historically great franchises in the history of American pro sports, up there is the New York Giants, which is a great segue to the team that I think is going to finish first. And I think as of right now, Vegas has them as the third favorite to win the AFC, and that's the Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns, just not that long after going 0-16, are already looking at possible Super Bowl contention. And if you want to see, I can't believe I'm saying this, but if you want to see a good example in the AFC North of a team in the past year and a half or so that's been very well managed, you look at Cleveland. I'm just as surprised I'm saying that as anyone else is. The fact that between the Steelers, the Ravens, organizations like that that the Cleveland Browns are really the gold standard in the AFC North as of right now, and I don't think that's an overreaction. Is because the Cleveland Browns said with the pick of Baker Mayfield, this is something that I thought about. I made a podcast about this about a year or so ago. Is that I thought the Cleveland Browns should pick a quarterback that, their situation is just so bad, it's just so, it's so historically terrible that they needed to kind of do a special way to rebuild. That I thought they should bring in a veteran QB, like something like a Tyrod Taylor or something like that. I think they brought in, and give him the reins for even a season or two, or just several games. Pick a quarterback to start behind him, and just get to become mediocre, and then worry about building. Instead, the Browns went out there and they took a quarterback in Baker Mayfield, who I questioned his ability. But I think you really saw in this past season that he can be a good NFL quarterback. Obviously, you don't want to overreact after one season, but he has that kind of potential. He showed that he can be a really good quarterback in the National Football League. But I think the biggest thing that Baker Mayfield had that I doubted on, and I'm seeing just how the dividends it's paying off that he has, is just that swagger, that moxie, that trait that I can only describe as that time that he planted the Oklahoma flag in the middle of Ohio State's field. That when Oklahoma went to play the Buckeyes, and they upset them, or it was a close game, or the highly ranked, is that he took that Oklahoma flag, planted it right in the center of the field. And I know that borders on disrespectful, but I think that's what the Browns obviously needed. Is that not only did they need a good player, they needed a good player who just who would show you how good he was. And I think that there became unfair comparisons. I think the comparisons to Johnny Manziel started to become unfair because we were comparing them on different levels. Is that, yes, Johnny Manziel had a little bit of that too, but Johnny Manziel, his kind of let's put it extracurricular, his kind of crazy stories were him in a bathroom, doing some stuff with, we think some controlled, some drugs or something like that with Floyd Mayweather, and just, a lot of crazy stories with Johnny Manziel that were away from the football field. For Baker Mayfield, it's all a competitive thing. It's that, planting your flag in another school's turf, that's a little disrespectful. But it kind of goes back to that. They doubted me. Not only did I went out there and I proved them wrong. I won that football game, and then I showed it to them. I shoved it in their face. And I think that's the difference between Baker Mayfield and Johnny Manziel, is that, Baker Mayfield, he has that talent, he has that skill, and it's not just about, flipping a bird, flipping somebody off like we saw Johnny Manziel infamously do. I think that was in a preseason game when he was with the Browns. But winning and then trash talking a little bit and just bringing that swagger back to a franchise that really, really needed it. So credit to, I think it's, John Dorsey and everyone over there in the Cleveland Browns management, ownership, management, GM, everything like that, is because they really nailed, I think, on that pick. And they're building the right way, because the offseason moves, if you haven't heard by now, if you've been living under a rock or just haven't had cell service or the internet, Odell Beckham getting traded to the Cleveland Browns, and that's why I mentioned the New York Giants as an organization who, not really sure what they're going for. They're rebuilding with an old quarterback right now. Not sure about that kind of strategy. But the Giants trading Odell Beckham to the Cleveland Browns, the Browns giving up a first-round pick in this draft, a third-round pick, and Jabril Peppers. And looking at that trade, it makes so much sense for the Browns because they have the talent right now after signing a player like Kareem Hunt in free agency, having Jarvis Landry on your roster. By then getting a player like, having Baker Mayfield progressing as a player, they have some solid tight ends on that roster. They have a solid O-line, a pretty good defense. Having all of those pieces, you say, well, what's more valuable to them? Getting that first round pick, that's that first, third, and round pick, and then Jabril Peppers, or getting another star? And I think that pairing, bringing Odell Beckham in, was a great move because all the storylines are right there. Him and Baker Mayfield, obviously, I just talked about Baker Mayfield. Odell Beckham, that picture in the one, I think it was like a Paris hotel or whatever, or the time on the boat, a little bordering on maybe some issues right there. But at the end of the day, he's a wide receiver, and that just does not come with the same amount of responsibility as the quarterback position does. Still, though, look at his production. Look at how good he is. He's one of the game's best. Pairing him with someone like Jarvis Landry is going to be a nightmare for opposing defenses. Because Jarvis Landry is that wide receiver in the NFL that is slow, that just has been leading the league in catches. Had so many catches down in Miami, but no one really recognized it because he was playing for the Dolphins and they never made a playoff run. So the fact that he was able to get all of those catches and in that terrible of an environment, now he's going to be the second option to Odell Beckham, is that so that now when Odell Beckham's not running down the field, when he's not open downfield, you can toss it off to Landry, who's just a possession, just a catch machine. Then having a player like Hunt coming out of the backfield who can not only run the ball but also contribute through the air. That's such a dangerous combination, and that goes back to my other point. The Cleveland Browns are doing the right thing. The first thing you got to do is you got to go out and you got to get a quarterback. You go out and you get a quarterback. And once you think you found that quarterback, you do everything. I repeat, everything you can to A, protect them, and B, give them weapons. That's how you win in the National Football League. That's how you get to the next level. I think the best way to realize this is to look at a case of a player who didn't get that, Andrew Luck. The Colts were able, the way that it ended up working out, the way they got that first overall pick, and the Luck was in that draft, they got lucky, for lack of a better term, but they got lucky, and they got what in my opinion is a generationally great quarterback. A quarterback who, a year after that team was going 2-14, he was taking them to the playoffs. A great QB, but they didn't draft to protect them. They never really got him all that many weapons. I'm sorry, T.Y. Hilton, he's good, but you would expect they could have gotten something better over the course of those years. Look what happened. He got injured. The teams that he was taking to the playoffs, they couldn't really get to that next step. He had trouble developing as a QB because any quarterback throws a lot of interceptions when they first enter the league. But when you're constantly under pressure, then and you don't have good wide receivers to throw to, how are you supposed to then develop that the better accuracy so you don't throw and decision making so you don't throw as many interceptions? So the Browns are doing it right. They think they found their quarterback in Baker Mayfield, and as of right now, I think that's the right move to bet on him, bet on Baker Mayfield, give him his weapons, make sure you protect him. I think they can go places. I'm so excited to watch the Browns this season, and I know that pairing of Odell Beckham and Baker Mayfield might be a little scary if you think about the possibilities, what could happen with those two guys. I'm excited to see it though. I think the Browns could be something special this season. Now, I don't think Super Bowl is as a likely destination for them. I still think you have a team like the Kansas City Chiefs who, obviously since the start of last year have gotten kind of worse, losing a player like Kareem Hunt. That looks like going to be D Ford is going to be leaving that defense, but they're still going to be a very, very good football team. Obviously, the Patriots, when aren't they good when they have Tom Brady and Bill Belichick? So I think there's going to be road bumps there, but the fact that the Cleveland Browns are in a spot of contention, are in a spot that if everything goes right, I would not rule it out for them to make the Super Bowl. It's a crazy time we're living in when the Cleveland Browns are one of the best managed football teams in the NFL, better than the Ravens, the Steelers, and the Giants. It's a different time, and I can't wait to see what they're able to do on the field, and just if Baker Mayfield can really transform into that franchise QB we all think he can be. That will wrap it up for this edition of the Jackson Neill Sports Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Remember, you can check out this podcast, as well as my Jackson Neill Music Podcast, Anything Goes with Jackson Neill, on jacksonneillpodcast.com. Link to that down in the description. That's where you can find the hub for every single one of my episodes. Also, if you like this content and you want to support the podcast, become a member on Patreon. On there are different membership tiers where you have access to bonus content published at the end of every single month, a Q&A show with me, possibly even your own Skype interview with me. But trust me, I'm going to have a sample of the bonus content coming out real soon. The first edition will be coming out on April 1st. So you definitely want to look into that. It's only $3 a month to get that. It's about, not that much. That's, what is that, about a cup of coffee or two from like your local favorite coffee place. So it's just not that much. I have some really cool bonus content with some musical artists that I interviewed for Anything Goes. I also have a segment from Jackson Neill Sports Podcast that I had to cut, and a Jackson Neill Music Podcast on there. So definitely look into that membership tiers on Patreon. Also, down in the description are links to my social medias at JacksonNeill20 on Twitter and Instagram. So follow me there to get some what I think to be cool content into your timelines. So that'll wrap it up for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you all next time.